Here to the end is Christmas in a few days. Isn't that crazy? Hopefully your shopping's done. Hopefully you've got it. You're set. If not, I'll see you out there in the store. And it's coming up. And we've been talking about Christmas from a different perspective. We've been looking at Christmas from the book of Revelation, which doesn't make sense because when you think of Christmas, you don't think the end of the Bible. You think the beginning of like the life of Jesus and like that, his birth. Why are we going to Revelation? And when we read Revelation, we realize, oh wow, there really is a lot in here about the first coming of Jesus. If you were here with us last week, we talked specifically, like we looked at Revelation 12, and maybe for the first time, some of us didn't even know that it was in there, that you realize, oh, Revelation has a very specific description of the birth of Jesus from kind of the spiritual side. And you kind of get a peek behind the spiritual curtains and you see, oh wow, there's a lot of things going on here. And in fact, there's this 7-headed dragon waiting to devour this child. And you're like, that's not in my nativity set. Like no one included the dragon in my set of all the stuff. And we realize, oh wow, Christmas, as much as it is about joy and peace and family and peace on earth, and Christmas, we realize Christmas is war. Christmas was there was a great cosmic kind of spiritual battle going on behind the scenes in which the enemy was trying to take out this child. And we see even Herod in real life in the story try to literally try to end the life of this child by killing every male child that was under 2 years old. And this real attempt to destroy and to devour this child. And we see that Christmas is really about a fight between good and evil. And the birth of Jesus is not just the birth of a child that was, to a poor family into a manger, and it sets up for a nice Christmas scene and story, and we do some nice, like the kids, we do kids dramas and music. It's like, oh, it's good for Christmas carols. No. Christmas is a fight. Christmas is a fight. This morning now we go to the end of Revelation and we're gonna read the end of the story. And so let me just give you some insight into me that you're gonna both maybe, I think, appreciate, but then also some of you will probably groan. Okay, so I'm a reader, I love to read. Any other readers? Any of you, you love to read? Okay, awesome. All right, any of you are like, man, I don't get those people at all. You're like, I tried reading once in 3rd grade and that was it for me. I knew I swore off books. Okay, so I love to read. Now, here, that's the part you're probably like, oh, okay, I respect that. Great, I'm a reader, you're a reader too. All right, maybe, whatever. Even if you're not a reader, you're like, oh, I appreciate, those who like to read. Okay, now here's where, just don't judge me too hard. I have a hard time reading fiction. Yeah, see, there it is. Yeah, I don't know who you were. Last service I got that too. And it isn't because I don't like fiction. So I'm like so practical that I have a stack. And the stack only gets larger. A stack of books that I want to read, that are on my list to read, and it's all like either leadership or theology or apologetics or like thinking or philosophy. So there's all these books that I'm like, I gotta read all this. And so if I read a fiction like a novel, I'm like, oh, awesome, I should be reading these. I feel guilty going like, but I have so many other things that I'm trying to learn, I want to grow in. And so like I'll read a fiction and like, all right, but I would rather be reading, about Socrates or Plato or, the 100 greatest philosophers influence in the world. And you're like, what? So my wife's the opposite. She's like novel and, story. And if it's a story and if it involves like, a romance or carriages with horses or Elizabethan era, she's like, I'll read that. Like, here we go. So like we're funny because we'll be in bed sometimes reading, and she'll have her book and she's like cozied up with her novel and like got a smile on her face because she's like imagining what it would be like to not have electricity or whatever. And my book is the Handbook for Spiritual Warfare. And she'll read over, she's like, I'm really uncomfortable seeing you read that. It's getting me thinking weird things. Can you read in another room? And I'm like, how about if I just like tell you I'm reading, Narnia. I'm reading The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. So like we're totally opposite. Okay, now I bring that up because sometimes for those who read novels, And I had a few people, even after last service, come tell me this. And my wife has admitted to this. If it's a story she really likes and is really into, especially if it's a series, she'll go to the last chapter and read to see, all right, I gotta know how this ends. And you're like, I have it in my hands. I just gotta go to the end and read, like, I got chapters 1 through 20, but I know chapter 21 is gonna give me all the stuff that I wanna know. And she'll sometimes read it, see that it's a good ending, and go, oh, now I can read the rest with joy, knowing I'm not wasting my time to get to the end. And it's like, what? It's like watching the end of the movie, knowing I'm gonna feel good at the end of this movie. They're not gonna just end it like most movies and like, what the heck, I just wasted my time. All right, this morning, we're going to read the end of the book. We're gonna read the end. We're gonna see how this whole thing ends and then realize, oh, because of how it ends, I can read the rest with joy. I can read and understand and experience the rest of what we have knowing how it ends. Because we know how it ends, we can get excited for what we experience now. And so we're gonna look at Revelation 21, and Revelation 21 gives us, it's what the entire Bible points to. It's what all of history points to. The history of the world literally is on this path to get to this passage that we're gonna read this morning. It's what we cling to and hope to. It's the single moment when our experience ends and a new one begins. So what we know as life and like just the interactive, like how we interact with people and this is just our experience of the world, that will come to an end, and then a new one begins from this moment on. A completely different now kind of experience, one that's hard for us to even fathom. How can that be? This passage gives us a glimpse of eternity, and this reality we saw. It starts with Christmas. Christmas story is the beginning of the plan for this reality. Here's what we're going to see this morning. Here's the point, and this is probably the most important maybe statement or summary that you'll ever hear. Here it is. The greatest experience you'll ever have is being in the presence of the one who made you. That's it. That's the greatest experience you'll ever have in your existence, is to be in the presence of the one who made you. It's greater than any experience you've had on earth to date. And think of like your most favorite days and like the best experience you've ever had. And if you're married, it was maybe your wedding day. And especially for like us guys, like you probably remember your bride walking down and that feeling and the sight, and it's probably etched in your mind. Like I could draw a picture. I know where we were and like who was sitting where. And like, all right, this is the moment, right? If you have kids, maybe it was the moment you had kids, that especially your first one, where you're going, this is different. And that first moment of pure joy going, this is our little child that we brought into the world. And then that all goes away the first diaper, and you realize, oh, this is a long road ahead of us. But for just a moment, you realize just how wonderful this precious little being is. And then they grow up, and you wish for that moment again when they couldn't talk back to you. You wish for those, whatever your greatest day is. Maybe it was a great family vacation or a family reunion with people that you haven't seen for years, or maybe you haven't had the whole family together again, and then you did for Thanksgiving, or maybe this Christmas, and like, we're all gonna be together, and you just kind of I wanna pause this moment, and this is I could live this day every day for the rest of my life and be the happiest person. Like, this is that day. All right, whatever that experience is, whatever that moment is, whatever that day is, it will be nothing compared to this. To experience and to be in the presence of the one who made you will be the single greatest thing you could ever experience. Nothing else compares. Nothing else at that point, almost nothing even matters. Just to be in the presence of the one who made you. Whoa. For the first time, to know, here he is. My whole life I've been hearing about it and thinking about it and waiting for it, and now I get to experience that moment. This is Revelation 21. We started this series and we talked about this thing called inaugurated eschatology. If you've been with us, we've been talking about this almost each week because it is the idea and this understanding that the end of everything, that God's plan for the end, eschatology, the study of end times, it began or was inaugurated, not like with, like the beast or the Antichrist showing up. It actually started with Jesus, and it was inaugurated or began with the birth, the life, the death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus. That began God's plan that he put in motion, and it's this idea that God has already started this, but has not yet completed it, meaning the kingdom is already here. God is already working in the world, but not yet fully. So we live in this in-between time. We talked about these bookends. The first coming and the second coming of Jesus are two bookends, and we live in the in-between. And the in-between is full of sin and chaos and frustration and injustice, and yet at the same time, God is moving to heal and to fix those things, but we don't see it fully arrive yet. And that isn't until we get to, you guessed it, Revelation 21. And now we see that God is gonna fulfill all of these things that started with the birth of Jesus, with Christmas, and now is gonna point to and get to the end of the story. Now we're gonna read the last chapter and realize, oh, this is how it all ends. Here's what we're gonna see. God's presence has always been the focus of God's plan. His presence with his people is not new. This plan for God to be with us is not something that is only for the future. That has always been a part of God's plan. Here's what we see. Revelation 21, here's how it starts. Verse 1, it says this, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there's no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God.'" This is the culmination of God's entire redemption plan, and it gets to this point in Revelation 21 where it says, "And now look, a new heavens and a new earth, and God will make his dwelling with his people, and he will now dwell with them, and he will be their God." God's now saying, I'm going to have my presence with you. Now, before we get to be with him, this is the thing that makes Christianity different than literally all of the other. Pick a religion, pick a faith, and this is what makes Christianity different. Before we get to be with God, he chose to be with us. Before we get to experience that presence that we're talking about, this presence of here's what it's gonna be like to be with him. And every religion says, do this, act this way, be this way, behave this way, think this way. And then you get to, if you're lucky, he'll let you be with him. On the flip side, like the biblical understanding of like who God is, biblical Christianity says, no. God doesn't wait for you to get your life right. He takes the initiative and he says, no, I'm gonna be with them. I'm gonna come to them. I'm not gonna wait for them to try to get their life in order. I'm gonna do the work to dwell with them. This has always been a part of God's plan. This redemptive plan is always included God's presence, his desire to be with his people. And we can go back long before Jesus, and we can go back to literally the very beginning, back to Genesis. In Genesis chapter 3, you know what's going on in Genesis chapter 3? This is before sin enters, before the fall. And here's what we see. It's that we're told this, that God takes walks with Adam and Eve. They're in the garden, and that God walked with them. They just, think about this. God says, hey, I created you for this garden, this world, and I created you for it, and you're gonna oh, by the way, we're gonna take some daily nature walks. It's gonna be so nice. They got to walk with God. I don't know what that's like, ready? But one day I will. One day, if you're a follower of Jesus, one day you too get to take a walk. And he's gonna say, hey, I have this garden, but look what else I built. I built this city. Do you want a tour? Yes. Show me where I get to live. right? And can it be, far away from this other person that might be here? I'm not gonna care. Listen, something, Lord, I'll sleep in a closet. I don't care. I'm just glad to be here. And they, from the very beginning, Genesis chapter 3, he created them, and then he says, I'm gonna come down and we're gonna just take a walk together. We're gonna walk and talk. In the beginning. And then the fall happens. And then they can no longer be in God's presence, and they're kicked out, and now sin enters the world and humanity and corruption, and we see the rest of history, and now all of a sudden people are doing things that are evil, and there's this history of this downfall of literally of civilization, and yet, even in the midst of that, when God could say, like, all right, hey, you guys messed it up, sorry, you're out. You had your chance, but you blew it. Instead, what God does is in Exodus 25, God instructed Israel to build a tabernacle so that he could dwell with them. Hey, we can't redo the garden here, but listen, even you as sinful people, here's what I want you to do. I want you to construct this tabernacle, and it's based on it's called a shadow of the temple in heaven. So all right, here's kind of here's God's throne in heaven. Now here's just kind of a sample of what it will be, of what it's like. You're gonna build it on earth, and I'm gonna dwell with you in this tabernacle. And then this tabernacle would be, it's essentially like a mobile home, because they would pack it up and move it with them and rebuild it and reset it up, a new tabernacle. And all right, we're moving again and kind of build it, all right. So they're just kind of nomads, right? It's like this large tent kind of thing, and it's very specific in the structure. And then it becomes a permanent one. All right, this is the spot of the tabernacle. This is the place. And then it gets replaced with the temple, and it becomes the temple. And the temple was there in Jesus' day. And all of it was because God was saying, all right, even amidst all of the sin of the world, I still want to dwell with you. I want to be with you. My presence, I still want to be there. And so he instructs them to build this tabernacle and then temple and this place called the Holy of Holies, where you can't go in because that was God's presence, often referred to in the Bible as the in Hebrew, the Shekinah glory. Like, this is the presence of God. Here he is. This is him. And you don't take this lightly. Like, to do it, to approach him in an unworthy manner would mean your life would end. You would die because you just can't withstand the amount of glory. Okay, all right. Yet God wants to be with us. And then we get to John chapter 1, and we're told this. John gives us a theological, a theological masterclass in who this Jesus is. And he talks about this word, and this word, or this logos in Greek. And the word is more than just like a word on a paper. It literally means the mind or thought or of God himself. And this is the logos or logoi with the logic, where we get the word logic. It's all right, then this word, he says, became flesh and dwelt among us. The word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. That God himself then says, no, I'm gonna actually now no longer just dwell with them, I'm gonna become one of them. Because I wanna be with them so much, because my presence my presence in their presence is so important, I'm gonna become one of them and live with them. Ooh, that's different. That is a different kind of faith than this do these things and these 5 pillars or these 7 virtues or whatever. Oh, this is different. God actually says, I'm gonna come down there and become one of you. We see this in Matthew chapter 1, when we talk about the story of Christmas, of the birth of Jesus. We see this quoting from Isaiah 7:14. It says this: the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means, look at this, God with us. He could be called anything. God the Savior, God the one you submit to, the King who will rule. Instead, we're told, no, here's his name. Ready? Here's what they're gonna call him. God is with us now. The point of Jesus coming, of Jesus being born, was that now God would be with us. From the very beginning, the plan that God had was always including his presence with us, that we would be with him and he would be with us. That's always been the plan. That's always been in the mind of God. The focus has always been the presence of God with his people. Here's the second thing we see, that God's presence not only has always been the focus, but God's presence always heals what is broken. Historically throughout the Bible, and then what we see in the future, and then even what we see in our lives, is that when God shows up, like when we're in God's presence, it's healing, and it's fixing the things that are wrong. It's making the wrong things right again, and it isn't making them worse. God's presence isn't. The point of God's presence isn't to make you feel worse about yourself or guilty or to bring about like forever judgment because you can't be good enough. Like the point of God's presence is to fix things. Here's what we see in verse 4. Revelation still 21, verse 4, it says this: He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Now, these verses often get kind of I think they're misunderstood a lot. So what people often say is, hey, when we get to heaven, like when we experience this, oh man, we won't cry anymore. And it doesn't say that. It ends with that, but it doesn't start with that. Do you know how it starts? Do you see that? Do you see what it starts? It says, He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Now, you can't wipe tears unless there are tears. Here's what this means. Here's what I think we have to look forward to. You and I, this we know this to be true. You're gonna stand before God. You're gonna stand before your Maker, and it's gonna be between you and Him. Not you and him and your spouse or your grandparent or a child or someone else or your pastor. I'm not involved here. Lord, I claim no responsibility for any of their lives. They do what they do. So it's gonna be between you and Him. And there's only two options here. Either He says to you, well done, good and faithful servant, come and now enjoy everything my Father has prepared. And you're because your response is, my Lord and my God, my Savior, my life is yours. I am at your mercy, and thank you for saving me. I gave my life to you. All right, welcome. Or He says to me, or to you, to someone, He says, option 2, depart from me. And here's the criteria, ready? Because I never knew you. Jesus says, on that day, I will say to many, depart from me. I didn't know you. You and I we didn't have a relationship. You didn't know me at all. And there's no third option here where you're like, well, hey, let's strike a bargain here. What if we make a deal? You have one of two options. And that's it. And it's determined by you and you alone and how you respond to what God has done for you and for me. And for those that are given the well done, come on in and experience now everything my Father has given you. This is what I think our experience will be like. I think our first initial experience, our first moment of meeting the Lord will be full of regret and full of tears. Because you will realize how much of my life I wasted on meaningless stuff. How many opportunities that you put in front of me and I just swiped out of the way. How many times I could have helped someone else or shared my story or my faith, and how many times I could have talked about you with other people and I didn't, and we will feel that deep. And I think we will cry some of our deepest, hardest tears. And then what we see is He wipes them away. You and I will experience, I think we'll experience this regret and remorse of, I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have lived this way. Lord, I'm so sorry, and I don't know why. I have no excuse, and I made these decisions, and it ruined this, and it did. I could have done so much more with my life. In tears. And then we read this, and He wipes every tear from their eye. And then he says, don't worry now. Now is a new experience. Now there's no more death or crying or mourning or pain, because the old order of things is gone. That was the old way of life. Now, welcome to this new experience in which there is no more fear or pain or sorrow or mourning. All of that is now gone. Ooh. I don't know about you, but this is a good end of the story. This is a good way to know this is how it all ends, with no more of the bad stuff. How does he do it? We'll experience it together. We'll be high-fiving as we running down the streets, which I'm told have no name, right? That was a pretty good joke. You guys should have laughed more than that. God's presence is always about healing. Even when Jesus comes the first time. So that's the end. That's what we have to look forward to, and we can't wait for that moment. But even when Jesus comes the first time, he gives us his mission statement. He actually tells us, here's what I've come to do. Jesus comes and he's given the opportunity to preach, and they ask him to come up in the synagogue, and in Luke chapter 4, we're told what he does. And he asks for a scroll, and they give him the Isaiah scroll, and he opens it to this passage. And he says in Luke chapter 4, verse 18, it says this: the Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, and to set the oppressed free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And then he rolls it back up, gives it to him, and sits down, and he says, today, this has been fulfilled in your hearing. He goes, this is my job now. This prophecy about what this person, this Messiah, was going to come and do, I'm actually him, and that's my job description. And it's to bring about the healing of all things that are broken, to restore what was ruined. And in the original passage in Isaiah, it says that one of the passages, one of the language in there is to bind up the brokenhearted. To bind up means to care for a wound, to care for the wounds of the brokenhearted. And Jesus is quoting this very passage, and he says, that's my job. The presence of God always is for healing what is broken. And we see it started with the coming of Jesus, that he's now going to provide a way of freedom from those who are captive to sin, and he's going to restore sight to those of us who are blind. He does so physically, but also spiritually blind, and he restores sight to us, and he does all of this to bring about healing. And we see that it begins here with the life of Jesus, and it's going to come to fruition completely when we get to the end, and we see that he really does get rid of all death and crying and mourning and pain, and all of it's done, and all the wrong things are made right again. All of the injustices now get justice, and we say, this is how it's supposed to be. The world is not as it's supposed to be. Just turn on the news. Things are not how they're supposed to be. But one day they will be. And we live in this moment in between this beginning and there's two bookends of the beginning and the end, and we wait and we rely on the Lord in the meantime, and we say, I look forward to this day when you will heal all things that are broken. God's presence is always, from when Jesus came even to the end, it is always about healing and fixing what is broken. And then we see this: God's presence always provides purpose. So not only has it always been the focus, God's focus has always been about being with his people. Not only is it about healing what is broken, but now we see this, it is about providing purpose, a reason. Here's what we see in 21 verse 5-7. It says this: he who was seated on the throne, he now speaks. This is now God himself. If you don't know what God sounds like, just think this is probably James Earl Jones' voice about to come at us, so get ready. I'm not even going to try to do it. I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, look at this language, it is done. It's done. Everything that I'm meant to accomplish is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty, I will give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Ooh. Those who are victorious will inherit all this, And I will be their God, and they will be my children. They will be my family, not my subjects, not my friends. They will be my kids. And I will be the loving father for them that they didn't even know that they needed. And we will have this reunion with God for the first time. That I've been talking to you my whole life, and I've heard about you, and I've heard people on stages talk about you, and I've read about what you do in people's lives, and I've experienced you, I think, to a little degree in my life, and now I get to meet you. Ooh, this is different. And you and I now, you meet God for the first time here in this life, and he changes you, and you have a new experience, a new outlook on life, and it's hard for even other people to even understand, like what's different with you? Like, what's wrong with you? Why do you go to church? Like, well, God has changed my life. What does that even mean? I don't even fully know, but I know I want more of it. I want more of it, not less. What does it look like? Let's read about it. Let's read about how he changes people's lives and how he's changed mine and forgiven me and provides purpose now. And we see this, that this statement of I am making things new to get technical in the Greek here, it's written in the present tense, meaning it's not that I've made things new or I will make things new. I am in the process of making things new, which means it's happening now. So God is making things new now, and he does that, ready? Through us. You and I have purpose while we live our life. While we have breath in our lungs, we have a purpose. And the purpose is not this, ready? Listen, the purpose is not this, to have a nice life. The purpose for you is not to get a bigger house with more rooms. So when the kids move out, you have more empty rooms to clean. Like, that sounds terrible. The purpose is not that you would have more things that you enjoy. Like, your life is about you and this like self-serving kind of idea that, I want to do what I want and I want to get what I want and that's all that matters to me. And that's not the purpose. That all goes away. When you meet God and have this experience, that all goes away. And now you realize I have a new purpose. And the purpose is to get as many people as possible to have this similar kind of experience so that they too can one day be in the presence of God and experience him forever. Ooh. I promise you and I, when we get before the Lord, and for those of us who are followers of the Lord, and he says, well done, good and faithful, come on in, and we're in heaven walking around and we're talking about our time on earth. I promise you, listen, I promise you, we are not gonna be comparing what we drove. What kind of car did you drive? Who cares? But it was a nice truck. I mean, not the nicest, but you had a key I had to turn. There's no push button, but it was fine. It was a fine truck. We're not gonna be talking about the house we had or how many vacations we took. You know what we're gonna talk about is how did God change your life? And when we're gonna do this, is people will come out to us and say, hey, here's how you change. Man, you talked to me about this and it changed my life. Ooh, well, that's different. There's people in my life that I can't wait they're still alive, and I talk to them, still not as much as I would like, but occasionally and randomly throughout the year. And people that invited me to church and really honestly got me saved and introduced me to the gospel and to Jesus, and did so knowing that I could reject it and reject them. And I can't wait to be in heaven and to say, hey, Jerry, just want to say thank you yet again. Hey man, I'm good. I'm glad you're here. I'm so excited. I'm like, I know. And he'll say, you thanked me yesterday. I'm like, I know. And guess what I'm doing tomorrow? I'm gonna find you. He's like, well, I'm moving to the other side of the city because I just can't handle it. I'm gonna find you, Jerry, and I'm gonna thank you again. There will be the things we talk about in heaven will be the lives that we got to be a part of, and how they changed us, and how we maybe hopefully had a little bit of involvement in other people's lives to help change their life for eternity, forever. And here's what we often do. And so this might hurt a little bit, but here we go. It's gonna hurt me too. For whatever reason, we don't talk about our faith because we get scared. And myself included. And I know that there's gonna be a time we get to heaven, and as much as we wanna be like, rah, we did it, and we were on fire, and everything was wonderful, there will be times where we go, man, there were times honestly, Lord, I think I was cowardly. And I wanna limit the amount of cowardly moments in my life that I can. And yet I know, man, there are times where I just got nervous or scared and didn't bring anything up. And here's the thing, okay, let's just talk honestly, as though I haven't been honest to this point. But like, what's the worst, when you talk about faith or Jesus or church, what's the worst thing someone can do? The absolute worst case scenario you can imagine is this: they reject it. Or they say, I don't want to hear about it. What else can they do? Like, I even know this. When I'm talking to people, I'm going like, all right, what's the worst they can do? They're not going to hit me. I mean, maybe they'll try, but I'm bigger than them. I'll take them. It's fine. I know I can take this one, so I'll share the gospel with this one. They're not gonna, like, no one's gonna physically harm you. So what's the worst that can happen? Is they say, no thanks, I don't wanna hear about it. Okay? That's what we're afraid of, is that somehow they'll say no, and we're just like, I can't handle that. And that can paralyze us into thinking, I don't wanna bring it up because I don't want them to think I'm weird. All right, now what's the best thing that can happen? What's the best thing that can happen? The worst is that they say, no, I don't want to hear it. Or, hey, it's not for me, it's for you, that's fine, whatever, but it's not for me. That's the worst. The best thing is that they can say, you know what? Tell me more. Ooh. The best thing that can happen is it can change their eternity. And all of a sudden they have a changed life. This is me, this is my story. And now I'm on a stage talking to you chumps about how you can be sharing your faith. And like, this wasn't a plan for me. Like, growing up, this wasn't my goal. It was like, you know what? I'm gonna be a pastor one day. Like, I don't even know what church was. It was weird, full of weird people. Still is. I'm one of them now. And like, that's not the plan. And yet, I was introduced to God and it changed my life. And now I'm going, man, what? Like, this is crazy. This is crazy. And it's all because this friend of mine, Candace, had the boldness to invite me to church. And I said, I've shared this before, I said no for 2 years, over and over. And then eventually I said, fine, I'll go. She could have easily given up and said, like, Lord, I invited him. I invited him for 2 years. He said, no, it's not on me. Yet she kept it one more time, one more time. And then it took. Listen, I can't overstate just how much power and authority and how much strength that you have in your words and your story to change people's eternities. And I don't know, there's generally the two best times to do this are Easter and these next 2 days. People will go to church on Christmas and on Easter, and they won't go to church any other time, and all right, so be it. Like, all right, we can get upset or say like, all right, let's do it. Let's do it. I grew up not going to church Christmas or Easter. It was all weird. I didn't even do that. And yet, here I am now, man, a changed life. And you and I have this opportunity to say, I don't want to shrink back. So a quick story. It's just to illustrate, like, all right, here we go. So I coach basketball, 7th grade boys basketball travel team, and my son's team, and it's a blast. And they play. They're actually, I think they just wrapped up their game. I don't know if I had to miss it because, again, I'm here with you, wonderful people, and so last week we were traveling. We were going to Eugene, and we had a couple other kids in the car and a dad, and they're not churchgoers, and I'm looking at this drive going like, all right, I got 2.5 hours each way. Like, you're stuck, and you're in a seatbelt. You can't even like try and get me, right? If you attack me, we're both dying. So you got to sit there and take it. And I decided ahead of time, all right, I am not going to let this drive go by without inviting them to church. It's Christmas. It's like the easiest time to do it, right? So we're talking about all kinds of other stuff, and I'm like, all right, the worst that can happen is it's awkward for the whole ride. So I'll wait for the second half of the last drive in case it goes bad, right? Just be strategic. Like, okay, I don't want to make this a weird thing for 5 hours. That's awkward. And so we're driving home, and we go through the whole weekend or the day, the games and stuff, and we're driving home, and And I was just like, all right, this is what I do for a living. I'm paid to get on stage and talk to people. And I'm like, here we go. All right. I don't want to make it weird with this parent. You know, he's a buddy and he's a dad of my son's friend. And all right, I don't want it to be weird. And I said, hey, are you, I don't know if you guys are church people, church family, but, you know, I'd love to invite you to our Christmas services. I don't know what you guys do for Christmas or that's a part of it. And then the kind of like and then I wait and see. Then, right, this, my experience, probably yours too, and like, they'll go, oh, either they'll go, yeah, we'll think about it. And you're like, okay, crash and burn. All right, we're done. Or they'll go, what times are their services? Like here, we have a lot going on, and so like, what do you do for Christmas service? Like, oh, awesome, open door. Like, oh, we got these services Christmas Eve, and we do one, and we call, it's kind of a dumb joke, we call it Christmas Adam. And the 23rd, he goes, 23rd? Oh, we could definitely do that. 24th is, we got all this stuff going on. He's like, you really do on the 23rd? I'm like, heck yeah, we do, just for you, man. Like, well, that's how it's. And they told me, he told me, he's like, all right, we'll be there. They're coming tomorrow. I'm going to bring them on stage and show them off to everyone. No. You know how awkward that would be? Your first time in church, like, hey, welcome. Like, say hi, everyone. And here's the thing, like, I could have, honestly, I don't always get it right, but that one was a good one. I could have just said, it's easier to just drive home and just talk basketball. Super easy. That would have been an easy thing to do. I'm hoping they come and get plugged in and like, all right, that they meet Jesus and that their forever experience is changed simply because I had the courage to open my mouth on a drive, at the end of the drive. But listen, I don't think you understand just how much influence you have in people's lives and their eternities. So you have a day, today, tomorrow, whatever your Christmas plans are, you're gonna be with people. Use this time as an opportunity to say, all right, Lord, I don't want to let this moment pass where, man, I could have used this as yet another opportunity to invite people to experience you so that they too can be a part of your presence forever. Would you do this? Would you stand with me? And we're going to worship the Lord together. The greatest experience you will ever have is being in the presence of the one who made you. So, your life then, the purpose of your life is not about you. It's not about the promotion, though the promotion's good. It's not about the stuff, though things are good. It is now about how many lives you can impact. How many forevers you can have influence in, to be a part of. Would you pray with me? And then we'll worship the Lord here together. So Lord, we thank you, and we recognize that the end of the story gives us a moment to worship and to have joy in the rest of the story. Because we know how it ends, we can have joy knowing the story now. And experiencing life now, knowing that the end is gonna be pure joy that we breathe. Until then, we experience the pain and chaos and hardship of life. But that too will one day end. So help us, all of us, myself included, Lord, to be bold in how we share you with others, how we invite people to come to hear about you. Let us be bold, knowing that we have a new purpose now. It's not about us. It really is about how we can introduce more people to you. Help us to focus on that this Christmas season as we get ready to celebrate your birth these next few days, to be bold in our faith with those around us. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.